Spanish Fork, then Spanish Fork to Salt Lake.
Yep, I miss living here. I went to high school here, so it would have been much easier to drive here. We need to excuse Senator Deidre Henderson, who couldn't unfortunately be with us today. Before we get started, let's talk to our audience for a second. There are several ways that you or others can watch and be involved in this program. In addition to watching us on Spanish Fork 17 on the cable system, we are streaming this live on the internet. And we tell you this so that you can share this information with your friends or family that may be interested in watching. There are two streaming options. One is to go to SpanishForkCN.org, and on the homepage, click Watch Spanish Fork 17 Live. Or you can go to youtube.com/SpanishFork17. Please take a moment and share this info on your social media so we can reach a bigger part of our community. Next, we welcome your participation. On Facebook, you can go to our Spanish Fork 17 page, and under the post about this program, add your questions in the comment area. We will try to get to as many as we can within the time we have together. Let's start this conversation off with a little civics lesson. Can you tell us a little bit about how the state government works?
Yeah, and I think the important thing is I just want to thank you for being here to start out. Thank Spanish Fork 17 and Spanish Fork City. I think the important thing to take away right away is we are in session. Every year we meet for 45 days. We're in session right now. Our system of government is very similar to the federal system. Obviously, we've got a governor and a lieutenant governor, like a president and a vice, and the vice president. We have the legislative branch. I'm here. I'm in the House of Representatives. Senator Henderson, who I work with, I know she had another commitment this morning. Does a fantastic job. She's our state senator. We have a balanced structure with a House and a Senate. Obviously, we have a court. The court comes, they give us a review every session, but our structure is very similar. But our biggest constitutional duty every year is to come into session, and our single biggest priority is actually just to balance the budget. Unlike the federal government, the state of Utah doesn't shut down. We don't fight over, we fight over budgets. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. We definitely fight with the governor, and we fight over budgets because sometimes we have ideas that are different. But we have a constitutional mandate. We balance the budget. In the first 3 weeks of the session, which is where we're at right now, we're actually in week 3. We've actually balanced our state budgets right now. So that's our big constitutional role. That's what we've done so far. I'm happy to talk more about the process, but I'll go back to you.
Yeah, one of the main things I think our viewers might want to more understand is how the bill process works, how you would get that going and how you get those passed.
I think that is a great question, and just a kind of an overview. And bills can come from a lot of different areas. So, for example, a few years ago, I had a student down at Spanish Fork High School. His name was Reed Haywood, and Reed says, Representative McCall, I knew his dad Dave. He works down at the title company. And Reed came to me and says, I have an idea. I think it's a good idea. I want you to consider legislation. And it dealt with buses and stop arms and cameras, and we brought that idea to the legislature. And then there's a long, lengthy process in how we vet legislation. We start in one body and we work our way through to the other. So a bill comes in, for example, if I run a bill, it'll come into the House. It'll go through a committee called the Rules Committee. I actually serve on the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee sifts, and it'll say, look, this committee over here, Committee A, B, or C should hear that legislation. At that point, a committee will hear the legislation. They'll either favorably recommend that or not. If it's favorably recommended, everybody in the House will vote on it. And once that's done, that process starts all over again in the Senate. So it would go to a Senate Rules Committee. The senators would decide, okay, it's going to go to Committee A, B, or C. At that point, that committee is going to hear that legislation. And if the Senate at that point agrees, then it goes to the full body, and the senators all get to decide. And at that point, it's still not law because the governor has an opportunity to look at it and say, you know what, Representative McKell, that was a really, really bad idea. I'm going to veto that. He didn't do that, thankfully. we got the bill passed. The example of Reed Haywood, he actually came up to the Capitol with me. He testified in committee, and it was fantastic in the end. We've been doing that. I've had bills go through the full process at this point within the first 3 weeks of the session, but it's a long, lengthy process. The important part of the process is in the hearing phase. We always invite the public. So if we've got viewers that are concerned, they think we're doing things we shouldn't, and they want to weigh in on the process, they can come to committee. They can call me. It's a very, very public, transparent process. But it's a good process. It makes sure that we we get a chance to look at all the implications of legislation.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty long process, but from what it sounds like, the ideas can come from anywhere.
They can.
People can contact you, and I hear you have a lot of options in order to contact you because you're very open to the public.
Well, people always ask me, how do I get involved in politics? And the reality is it's very simple. Call your representative. My email is public, my cell number is public. I love to hear from constituents. Every session we have a number of folks that'll come up from our area. I see Rick Nilsson from the school, our school superintendent. I see the mayors. I represent Spanish Fork, Salem, and Woodland Hills. I see Mayor Christensen from Salem, Mayor Leifson from Spanish Fork, Mayor Prey from Woodland Hills. They come up, and in fact, this last week we had a funding request for Woodland Hills City, and we'll talk about that later on. But I had Councilwoman Carrie Malkovich. She came up and was in committee testifying for about that funding request and why it was important to Woodland Hills. But really, it is really easy to get involved. I think both Senator Henderson and I are very easy to reach. We both live here in Spanish Fork. And I always joke with people that say it's so hard to get involved in the political process, and I always pull out my cell phone. It's as easy as call or text, and I try as hard as I can to respond to all of those calls. I have an intern that works with me on Capitol Hill, but it's very easy to get involved.
That's awesome. Okay, so I think we're going to start talking about more specific things. What are your impressions of local needs? Like, what do you think is really going on in that area?
So one of my big, I'm glad we get a chance to talk about that. One of my big priorities this session is to deal with post fires. We had significant fires here in our district. I think everybody knows that. We're not here to cast blame one way or another. What do we do now? Now that the fires are past, how do we deal with that? Woodland Hills City has a very significant concern. If you look at the burn scars, and I think we could go outside right now, we'd look up at the mountain, you can see the burn scars, I can see the burn scars. The state hydrologists and the experts on the ground, they think there is a high probability of mudslides and additional damage. So how do we mitigate that? And that's one of my concerns. So Woodland Hills has come to me and they've asked for some funding. They've got basically a chunk of ground above the city that they'd like to put in a retention basin where they think they could control flooding above the burn scars. That request is actually $650,000. It's a lot of money.
Wow, yeah.
One of the things I think is important to point out for our viewers is, as a state, we have two large rainy day funds. One of the reasons we have a AAA credit rating is because the state of Utah has two large rainy day funds for disaster and post-disaster. However, cities and counties, we've actually restricted how much they can save. For you and I, we want to save money, but with local government, there's always a concern, do we let local government save too much because it's taxpayer dollars? So there's a restriction that local government can only save up to 25% of their budget. Woodland Hills' annual budget is about $1 million. So the max savings that they could actually keep is about $250,000, and that doesn't work when you've got a project as big as a basin up above the city. So I've got a funding request. We're asking for $650,000 so far. I think we're in good shape to get some of that funding. Cities and counties are entities of the state. We have an obligation to our subdivisions of the state. So that's moving forward. One of the other things I've looked at is rather than me having to come to the legislature for Woodland Hills or a representative in St. George or a representative in Cedar City or Bountiful, what if we create a post-disaster mitigation fund? So I'm proposing a post-disaster mitigation fund as well. I'm asking the legislature to use kind of a concept of a rainy day fund to set aside $2 million this year, $2 million every subsequent year, and put it in a fund that cities can draw from when they have problems that are similar to Woodland Hills and Elk Ridge. As I've looked, we had significant flooding in St. George. We've had issues in Cedar City. The Sealy fire down in Emery County, Huntington Canyon, it would have been nice to have a fund in place. So I'm asking my colleagues to trust me a little bit and to set aside some funding similar to a rainy day fund for some of that post-mitigation.
Yeah, especially with all the fires that happened this past year, they could definitely use the rainy day fund.
Yes.
My question is it all environmental, or what other kind of extreme measures would entail using that rainy day fund?
So the way I've looked at it with the post mitigation, it's fire, flood, earthquake, and what I've done is there's good models. This is not something. The good news is I don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's FEMA guidelines for what post mitigation looks like. We actually have a fund for the state of Utah that does the same thing. It just doesn't apply to the local government. Doesn't apply to cities and counties. So we're going to use the FEMA guidelines and do that. There's also an additional funding request. I think we're here in Spanish Fork that would have some potential benefit to Spanish Fork. Utah County has a funding request. We need to reseed above all of our cities, and that reseeding project is about $24 million. The federal government is going to pay most of that, but there is a local match, and there's a percentage that we need to come up with locally. So there is a funding request for the reseeding itself that would impact Spanish Fork, Salem, Woodland Hills, Elk Ridge, Payson, and Spring City down to the south, and that's moving forward as well.
How far along in the process is this bill so far in the session?
So right now it's going to go to committee. So this coming week it'll go to committee in the House, and to the point about our process, it'll go to the committee in the House, and assuming it passes there, it'll go back to the full body of the House, and I hope my colleagues pass it out. I haven't had any opposition. I think it makes sense, and I think my colleagues recognize the importance of doing it.
That's great. Okay, so moving on, could you explain a little bit about the overall budget?
Okay, and that is a great question. And I think in the introduction, one of the key takeaways today that I think I want our viewers to realize is we are a AAA rated state. We balance our budget. It's our #1 priority, and it's a constitutional mandate. Every time we hear the federal government talk about, oh, we need a balanced budget amendment, we don't have a balanced budget amendment. We don't need it. It's in our Constitution. So we have about a $17 billion budget. That's what we use to operate government in the state of Utah. Our single biggest funding item by far is education. If you look at a pie chart, the biggest piece of the pie goes to education. Always has. Our income tax. When we have a flat income tax of 5%. Those dollars go directly to education. That's our biggest priority in the state. I think one of the reasons we have a very, very strong economy, and I think a lot of credit belongs to our educators. I think they've done a fantastic job with the dollars that we've given them. Unfortunately, per student, we actually give less money than just about every state, and it's hard because we have a lot of kids, but I think it's fair to point out at the same time, while we give less per student, the biggest part of our budget, the biggest bulk of it, and in comparison to other states, we have a higher percentage of our budget overall that goes to education than any other state. We are unique, and that's okay, but every year on Capitol Hill we have to figure out how do we balance public safety, transportation, infrastructure, water, at the same time making sure we sufficiently fund education.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned education and a few other things. How is balancing the budget really helping the people in the community, though?
Well, I think more than anything else, it provides stability in our economy. Again, we are a AAA rated economy, and because we have stability, I think there's tremendous growth. It's fascinating to watch. So this last week, UVU started a new master's program in Silicon Slopes because there's incredible growth up in the north end of Utah County, and a lot of that growth and the continued growth we see is because business leaders know that Utah has provided a stable economy. We're still catching up on workforce. We need engineers. We need computer scientists. We need employees, and our universities are doing all of they can to catch up. But it's a challenge. But we've provided stability in the marketplace that I think other states have not been able to provide. I look at and what we try to do is try to keep our taxes low and make sure that we go out of our way to be business friendly. And I think you see that, especially in Utah County. we're in very, very good shape right now.
That's awesome. Being a BYU student myself, I see how much the universities are expanding. We're getting a new building almost every year. It's crazy how fast it's expanding. So also moving on, what would the Medicaid expansion entail? We've heard a little bit about that. What would that entail? Okay,
so I did want to talk about Medicaid expansion. I'm glad you brought it up. I have got lots of questions and emails. I think we take a few steps back. We start kind of with Obamacare, and Obamacare was something that this state has rejected time and time again. And this last year we had a ballot initiative. It was Proposition 3, and Proposition 3, the idea behind Proposition 3 would be to expand to full Obamacare or full Medicaid expansion, meaning everybody at the poverty level and beyond to 138% of the poverty level would receive government health care. And the legislature came in and looked at those numbers and scaled that back a little bit. And there's been some concern, how dare the legislature step on the voice and the will of the people. We've got some constitutional constraints. Again, we have a balanced budget amendment. What we did is, after that passed, it was a $90 million tax increase that the voters voted for. We looked at those numbers and we looked at them today in today's dollars. Okay, it's $90 million today. 5 years from now, you're $200, $300, $400 million. So the legislature made some adjustments per our constitutional duty to balance a budget. We have other fiscal constraints in the state of Utah. We're hearing about large surplus dollars. The hard part is you can't just take surplus dollars and stick it in Medicaid expansion, because most of those surplus dollars are tied to income tax, and in our law, in our statutes, that income tax is directed to education. So while it seems like we could take some of those surpluses and immediately drop it in and fund this full Medicaid expansion, that's a restraint that we have. So what we did is we stepped in, we looked at it, and we said, okay, the voters said we want a $90 million tax increase, and as we came in and we negotiated with the governor, we agreed to that compromise. That $90 million tax increase the voters approved, that moved forward. We expanded to 100% of the poverty level. But we also made sure that our budget can always be balanced. We also made sure that we can address our critical needs in education. So we scaled it back a little bit. I always bring surveys, so I'm gonna hold these up. So every session I send out surveys, and I always want to hear what the public has to think, and I ask questions about Medicaid expansion and what we should do, how we should resolve Medicaid expansion. And one of the options I asked is leave it exactly as is, without any kind of adjustment. And I've got over 1,000 responses, and down here in our district, only 12% said we should leave it exactly as is, because
so people are wanting change.
People are wanting change. People want to expand, and the will of the people is to expand to a certain extent. But I think the even more broad will of the people is, if we expand, let's do it in a way that makes sense. Let's do it in a way that fits into our budget, fits into the uniqueness of Utah. So that's what we've done. I think the compromise that we've reached, that's happened. It's happened the first 2 weeks of the session. We came in and we passed that. The governor signed it into law. That has been taken care of at this point. But if I've got viewers that are still concerned, would like to talk to me about it, I'm happy to look at emails. I'm happy to continue that discussion. I think we've done the right thing in scaling it back. I think it's also important to point out that this district, House District 66, where we're at in Spanish Fork, we didn't vote for Prop 3. A majority of us didn't vote to expand. Utah County didn't vote for Medicaid expansion as well. And one of my concerns and one of the difficulties with ballot initiatives is, when I explain to you the process we follow to pass a bill, there is a long, lengthy vetting process. Through the initiative process, there is no vetting. You take a concept, you put it on the ballot, and that's it. You don't have a chance to make sure that it meshes with the code. And another big concern is, I don't think voters realized it was a $90 million tax increase. If I have a really good idea and I decide I want to pass a law, Michaela, you bring me a really good idea and it's brilliant, and
one day,
one day, and you decide that you want to put root beer in every drinking fountain at BYU.
It's a good drink.
No Coke, no Coke. I think they did that, but
yeah.
You decide to do that, and we open a bill, and what happens is we'll receive a fiscal note, and we'll know what that impact is going to be, and it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that, and you and I are going to know that up front because our analysts are going to tell us. The problem with the initiative process is some of that economic impact is not built in. So when we have a big initiative, voters don't get to see up front, this sounds like a really good idea. It sounds like a really good idea to put root beer in the drinking fountain, but they don't see that there's a cost of $90 million to the taxpayers. So I think there's things we need to do to improve the initiative process. I support the initiative process. It's in the Constitution. I don't think we should ever be afraid to hear what voters have to say. But at the same time, I think if we're going to continue with the initiative process, we need to make sure voters have a full understanding of what they're getting themselves into within our other constitutional constraints.
Yeah, I went to the Bills and Bagel community meeting that we had last Saturday, and I think what I got from it is a little bit of the confusion with Medicaid expansion was knowing who it covered, and a lot of people, I guess, didn't know who it already covered as it stands right now. So I don't know, could you explain a little bit of what it already does?
Well, and what we did is we'll actually push the coverage up to 100% of the poverty level. And the poverty level, I can't give you an exact number because it depends if you're married, if you're single, if you have 2 kids, 7 kids, but that's what we've done. There's always been a concern of going up to 138% for a working single adult. We don't live in a socialist nation. I mean, I'll be very clear. The Governor Herbert's talked about it. Congressman Stewart recently formed a group. In Congress, it seems that there's a push towards almost a form of socialism. You've got Congresswoman Cortez, who's talking about a tax of up to 70% on the wealthy job creators in America. We were founded on principles of free market and competition. And I almost wonder if we're getting just too far away from that. I know the governor was really clear in his State of the State address that, look, we're going to take this serious and make sure that government was never designed to be everything to all people. And we really want to have a safety net, but that does need to be limited.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so next on the agenda is higher education.
Okay. And thank you. That's kind of a softball for me. So this session, Speaker Brad Wilson asked me to serve as the chair of the Appropriation Committee for Higher Education. So for the past 3 weeks, we've been digging into the budgets for higher education, about $1.9 billion, and we've actually, as of yesterday, we set their budgets and some of the budget priorities. It's been a fantastic opportunity to meet all of the presidents. I've met with President Tuminez at Utah Valley University, our local university. She is fantastic. She came up, made a great presentation. She may be small, but she's got a lot. She's got a lot of fire and a lot of. She is mighty. She is mighty. She is a fantastic president, and it's going to be fun to see what she does. I mentioned before, UVU has got a great program they just launched last week to bring an MBA program to Silicon Slopes. I think that's kind of critical at this point. So that's kind of a softball. I love higher education. It's a committee that I've wanted to serve on for a long time, and it's been fun serving as the chair. Yeah.
What specific bills are being in the works for higher education right now?
So higher education, you're going to see a number of bills coming in the next legislative session. So last session, one of the things that we've been concerned with is, what is the vision of higher education? Higher education is changing in ways. I mean, content is free. I've got a computer in case I get questions. Content is free. How do we compete? How do we match our needs with the business community? We have formed a strategic planning commission. President Watkins from the University of Utah is on that commission. President Cockett from Utah State University is on that commission. Speaker Wilson's on that commission. And that commission right now is designed to decide what is the future of higher education, what is it going to look like as we go forward. So coming in the next legislative session, I think you'll see legislation. They've got a statutory deadline to come back with a report of how we improve higher education. That's coming in November. There's going to be regional meetings up and down the state looking at our governance structure. How do we empower the trustees at the local universities? How much power do we give to the Board of Regents at the state level? How do we look at the Regent Scholarship? That's something a lot of parents, that's shifted over the last few years, and that's caused some anxiety for parents when they rely on one structure and it changes. How do we make sure that remains consistent? So you'll see over the course of the next 8 months, 8 to 9 months, a big process, and I think you'll see some legislation in the 2020 legislative session.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, I'm loving our conversation, but real quick, short break to catch our breath. We'll be right back.
During winter months, Spanish Fork City is committed to removing snow and ice from public roads as quickly as possible to provide safe travel for citizens. City ordinances regarding snow removal requires residents to remove vehicles from public streets once snow begins accumulating for up to 48 hours. Doing so allows streets to be cleared more thoroughly and creates less incidents of damaged vehicles or trailers during plowing operations. The mayor has authority to extend the 48 hours in the event of an unusually large storm. You can assist in snow removal operations in several other ways. Travel at a safe distance from snowplows at all times. Never pass or attempt to stop a snow removal vehicle. Advise children never to play near or in a snowbank near the roadway. Exercise extreme caution when driving in inclement weather. Safety for you, other motorists, and pedestrians is the highest priority. For more information, visit SpanishFork.org and the city's social media pages.
Last year I was at my lowest, going through some pretty serious depression. A couple of friends of mine stopped by the house and said they were worried about me. Said they'd feel a lot better if they could hold on to my firearms until things turned around. I think they saved my life.
If your loved ones are struggling, talk to them about temporarily storing their guns away from their home, because things do get better.
Spanish Fork is a great city to live in. Recently, we were named the 3rd safest city in the state, but that doesn't mean that we're immune to crime. In fact, the real problem is that we are the guilty ones. We make it easy for the bad guys to commit crimes against us. Be smart and lock your vehicles when you go home or to visit a friend. It only takes a few moments to lose your valuable property. Your belongings are only as safe as you secure them. Don't be guilty of making crime easy.
The city of Spanish Fork needs your help in preventing sewer backups. Flushing the wrong things down the toilet can cause expensive plumbing problems in your home, business, and for the city. Do not flush paper towels, cleaning wipes, baby wipes, facial tissues, diapers, or feminine hygiene products down the toilet. These products don't easily break down, are resistant to degradation, and can hang up in pipes. At our sewage pumping stations, public works employees have to spend extra time and money removing trash from our sewers. Labels may say flushable, but disposable products are clogging our sewer pipes and damaging pumps and equipment. For more information, visit our website or call 801-804-4541. Save yourself and the sewer utility from a pain in the drain. Put disposable wipes, rags, and towels in the trash, not the toilet.
In the scope of a
Welcome back.
lifetime,
We're here with
10 minutes.
Representative Mike McKell. He's here talking with us about the legislative session going on right now. We were just talking about education, but I think we're going to move on to the ethics legislation. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yes, in fact, this week, Friday, I had a bill that made it all the way through, and I brought my computer just in case, so I am dialed in case there's questions that come up. I passed a bill, House Bill 64, Lobbyist Expenditure Amendments. And what I did is I met with my drafting attorney. I had a concern, so just so you know what our rules are, as a legislator, right now, I can receive a gift, but there's a cap. If the cap is $10, I can receive a gift up to $10. So I could receive a really, really nice pen up to $10, or Or, I mean, who knows? People bring cookies to the legislature, and we can accept things up to $10. That's a legislative rule. I can receive publications, so books up to $30. A few years ago, it used to be $10 for books, and I actually ran a bill and changed it to $30 because what was happening is I'd receive a book, and I'd have to go down to the post office, spend $8 to $10, and mail it back to whoever sent it to me. So I passed a bill that simply said we can receive books up to $30, or we can drop them off at the library, or even discard them if we choose. And the other thing we can receive is we can receive food up to our state daily per diem. So I've been concerned for a long time. I think that rule is fine for the legislature. But as I looked at that rule is different for all other elected officials. And I'm not here to complain about mayors or city councilmen. In fact, in Spanish Fork where we're at, and in Woodland Hills and Salem, the mayors and the city council members that I work with, I think they're fantastic. I think they're upstanding. I think they're ethical. But what I've been concerned with the inconsistency in our rule. You look at different cities, their rule is higher, their rule is lower, there's no rule at all. Sporting events, can a county commissioner take tickets in the lower bowl of the Vivint Center at a jazz game? So what I did is I told my drafting attorney, I said, look, I don't want to change our rule, but I want whatever our rule is, I want it to apply to everybody. And he says, well, what do you mean by everybody? And what I mean is every elected official in the state.
Across the board.
Across the board. So what I thought would be a two-paragraph bill that simply says everybody has the same rule as the legislature turned into about a 30-page bill where we had to take our code and apply it across the board. I think it makes sense that we have consistency across the board. So that has actually passed the House, that passed the Senate yesterday, and the new rule now that our rules will apply to both mayor, city council, special service district, school board, and so consistency. Everybody can receive the same gift up to $10, a really nice pen, but they can't receive any more than that. So we passed that this session. I've always been concerned about ethics. When I first got into the legislature, then Speaker Lockhart put me on the investigation into John Swallow. So I've always kind of followed our ethical rules. Where can we approve? What makes sense? How do we deal with? I mean, we need to be accountable. We're elected officials. We hold public trust. So we need to make sure that we take care of that duty that we've been given.
Do you think this has been a particular issue or just more of a proactive measure?
Well, I don't really want to throw folks under the bus, but it is an issue. There's no question it's an issue. I could give you examples. I'm not going to. I choose not to. But I will say this. Let me give you the politically correct answer. The reason the legislature changed the rule for the legislature is because legislators were showing up in the lower bowl of jazz games during the session. They were showing up at other sporting events, and they were receiving gifts that they probably shouldn't have received. I think those concerns that created the change for the legislature are the exact same concerns that I have that have created the change for everybody else. So without throwing people under the bus, it's concerned. Are there problems? Absolutely. And I think the problems were the exact same problems that the legislature faced when they set its own rule, that $10 cap.
So this would put everyone at the same standard. Yep. Awesome. Okay, so
pretty hard to argue against, to come into committee and tell a sitting legislator, look, I'm a mayor up in Salt Lake. I ought to be able to go to the lower bowl jazz game and receive that gift when that sitting legislator can't. So there was not a lot of public outcry from the. I don't know that the mayors across the board. I didn't hear any concern from our mayors, obviously, but I don't know that everybody was happy. Yeah. But at the same time, they didn't come in and tell the legislature.
I mean, it's about serving the people, right?
Yes,
so.
Yes.
Definitely. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the alcohol legislation. What would the alcohol legislation entail?
Okay, so there is a proposal. I think it's Senator Ipsen. And again, this legislation is not before the House at this point. It'll work its way through the Senate. If the Senate agrees, then I'll have to vet the legislation and look at it in the House. And I serve on the Business and Labor Committee. So if it makes it all the way to the House, it'll probably come before my committee. There is a proposal right now to change the type of beer that you can buy in a grocery store from 3.2 beer to 4.8 beer.
That's quite a change.
It is quite a change. There is an argument right now that there are a number of states across the nation. I guess the argument is this: there are very few states right now that still sell 3.2 beer. Utah is one of them. There's a small handful of states that still sell 3.2 beer. Right now, a number of those other states that are in our same market are doing away with 3.2 beer. They're going to 4.8 beer, and there's a push to move us to 4.8 beer as well. And the concern or the argument is supply and demand. If we're one of the only states with 3.2 beer, our consumers won't have options. It doesn't change we changed the DUI law. We dropped from .08 to .05. There was a fair amount of outcry to that. I thought it was interesting. We had folks that said it's going to ruin tourism across the nation. And if you look at Canada, the entire country is .05. If you go to Asia, most Asian nations are .02, and Europe is .05 or less.
So it's been done.
So it's been done, and actually, America as a nation, we're actually behind. So I would hope that the good folks from Canada aren't coming to Utah to binge drink, because they're at .05 and we were at .08. But back to that legislation, that's something I'm going to have to decide. I think consumers need to have options right now, and I did put that on my legislative poll. It's pretty split. I think 60% of the people don't support changing it, 40% down here do. Right now, I'm inclined to support the change. I think consumers still need to have options, and the DUI law will remain exactly the same. My concern is, how do we make sure the public is safe? Are there going to be more DUIs? And I think the answer is no, because I think the law stays at .05. So if you can have a little more alcohol content in your beer, but the law still says .05, to me, I'm not overly concerned with the change. That's one where we're throwing it out there today. I hope if there are a number of concerns, I hope people reach out to me and share those concerns. I think right now I'm inclined to support the change, again, because we have a constraint, and that's the .05 that exists today. So whether there's a little more alcohol content in beer or not, that doesn't impact the overall structure of .05.
People are still having to be cautious and aware.
Yes.
Okay. So you said that it's pretty split. How is it up on the Hill? Are people pretty split up there, or is it?
I think it is. I think it is fairly split. One of the big lobbyists on the Hill, we'll just throw it out there. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They've come out. They've opposed it. We'll see what kind of impact that has. I know they engaged in the marijuana discussion, and in the end, I think we had a good compromise, and maybe that opposition becomes significant. I don't know. I haven't seen anybody else out there in front of this opposing that legislation, so we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So now we're going to talk about initiative processes and issues.
Okay, so I talked a little bit about the initiative process with Medicaid expansion, and I think I just want to reiterate, the legislature right now is looking at the initiative process. The initiative process is in our Constitution. It's something that is important, and I think we should always listen to voters. I think we should engage voters, and I think voters should always be involved in the process. As we move forward with the initiative process, I guess my biggest concern is we need to make sure the initiative process is fair and is transparent. One of the glaring mistakes, I think, one of the glaring errors that I think we can adjust in the initiative process is voters ought to know the fiscal impact on a budget, and they ought to know what some of our fiscal constraints are. So I know there's a proposal moving forward right now that would simply say, if you're going to put an initiative on the ballot, that the legislative analysts are going to be able to throw out a dollar number of what that could cost the taxpayers and what it means to our overall budget. I mean, the example I gave you is Medicaid expansion. That was a $90 million tax increase. And if you had a brilliant idea, which we'll work on a bill at some point. If you had a brilliant idea, we worked on a bill, if I open up a bill and it has an impact on state government and on the economy, I get a fiscal note, and I know what that costs the taxpayer, and we need to improve that with the initiative process.
Okay.
I don't think we ever get away from the initiative process, but we need to make sure that it's very, very transparent. We have a unique structure, and our structure, I know I've said this before, our income tax goes directly to education. That a lot of those surpluses that exist, they can't be moved around because they are statutorily structured to education. So how do we make it all work? I think we can do better, certainly.
And transparency, right?
Yes.
Making sure people are more aware of everything overall. Okay, awesome. I know something that you wanted to talk about was this skate park at the State Fair.
Yes, I did want to talk about the skate park at the State Fair. So the Deseret News ran a little story this week about a funding request that I have made. Right now, the State Fair Park, for years and years, I used to chair natural resources, and for years and years, the state park lost money, and our buildings were getting older and older and older, and we had significant problems with it. And the question was, do we continue the state fair? Can we make this profitable? And I think we answered that question in the past, and we had a great partnership, a great partner that came in. It was actually the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City. They all came together and said, look, state of Utah, we want the State Fair Park to thrive. We'll come in with some dollars for a new stadium for the State Fair Park and the Days of 47 Rodeo if you'll match some of those funds. So the church came in with some funds, Salt Lake County came in with some funds, Salt Lake City came in with some funds.
So a lot of people are pitching for this.
A lot of people are pitching, and we came in partnership with everybody, and we built the new Days of 47 stadium. It's provided a significant bump in attendance to the state fair as well, and it's been fantastic for the state. Well, now we've got another exciting opportunity. We have the company Vans, and they have asked the state. They said, look, we want to hold an Olympic quality world skate park event, right? Skating event. This is going to be televised across the globe. The last time we did an event this big, we did it in Brazil, and it was a huge, huge success. The winner walks away with upwards of $600,000. I mean, this is a big, big event. At the same time, the state of Utah is trying to bring back the Olympics, and skateboarding is now going to be one of these experimental sports in the Olympics. So they came and said, look, this project is going to cost about $500,000 to $600,000. We will build the skate park. You will own it, and we want you to contribute because it's your asset and you own it. But we'll also kick in another $200,000. Our Utah Sports Commission looked at it, and the amount of revenue that it could generate for just ticket sales alone is about $225,000. So we'd cover almost our entire investment in year one. But with earned revenue and media attention and the economic impact, our sports commissioner, Jeff Robbins, has said he's looked at it, they've run the analysis, the state's run the analysis. It's about a $12 million impact, positive impact to the state of Utah. So we're in Spanish Fork. If you get up by Centennial Park, there is a skate park. It gets kids outside. I think it's really, really positive. The city of Spanish Fork actually had to pay for the whole thing. The city got to keep the asset, and I think it's fantastic and it's good. I mean, we have this active and healthy movement in Spanish Fork, and it's good getting kids outside. But with our skate park at the State Fair, not only are we not going to have to pay for the whole thing, but it has the potential to generate upwards of $12 million. I think it's fantastic. I've asked my legislative colleagues to support it. I think there's tremendous support for the skate park, and who knows, maybe the next Olympian in skateboarding will train at our facility.
Yeah, it comes
we
from
hope.
Utah.
But that'll be part of the state fair this year. There will be a skate park and a world-class skating event in Utah.
Yeah, it sounds like it would benefit so many people, the community, in so many different ways.
People are excited. I think it's really positive, and that's just an asset that the State Fair Park is going to own. That is state property, and that'll be one more addition to the venues that are already at the state fair. So it's
Wow.
cool.
That's great.
It's super cool.
Yeah, I want to go to it. I want to see it.
Me too.
See
me
it
too.
in action. Okay, so now it's a little bit different with this one. It's the stoplight initiative that's going on. What is that?
So,
really?
and I know this was a question that I think kind of came in. We did see a bill this week in the House. It narrowly passed, I think, and I voted against it. If you've got bikers, there may be a bill that deals with cars. I haven't seen it if there is. We have over 1,000 bills, so some of them are still trickling through.
That's a lot.
But there was a push. There was a push with bikers. If you're biking down and you hit a red light, to allow those bikers to still push through if the intersection's clear. I do a lot of injury work as an attorney. I don't think it's safe. I think we're running a lot of risk to create bad habits. In my view, I think they should stop. I think they should wait for the lights.
It would start with a lot of confusion as well.
I think so, but mixed reaction. I think it narrowly made it through.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I think creating that habit has some potential. I've done too many cases where people have been hit and hurt really, really significantly on bikes. I think it's a concern. I think there were folks in the state that were concerned, but we'll see what the Senate does with it. I think it made it through the House.
Okay.
It'll move over to the Senate Rules Committee. They'll send it to another committee, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, okay. Next is a little bit of something that I think is causing some area of concern. It's the red flag laws.
Yes.
Can you explain those a little bit?
So red flag laws, you've seen this across the country with shootings. And the idea behind a red flag law is, if we think somebody is a potential risk, at what point does the government step in and take away their guns? So far, our legislature hasn't passed a red flag law. I'm not supportive at this point.
I'm sure it's a very touchy subject.
It's a very touchy subject. We have a constitutional right to carry and bear arms. The question is, how do we do it? We clearly, I think we all recognize that we have people who do suffer from mental illness, suffer from depression. How do we identify those who are really going to go out and commit violent crimes with guns? I don't think the science is there. I think it's a very, very difficult issue. My biggest concern with the red flag laws is to have government take away somebody's constitutional right without due process. I don't think that's appropriate. Right now, if you've got a concern that somebody could hurt you, you could get a protective order. I think we have a legal process in place.
Things are already in place. So.
They are in place. I think the bill sponsor would like to see a process that's quicker. And I don't necessarily disagree that having a quicker process makes sense. But at the same time, you've got a constitutional right. There has to be due process. And it's just a difficult issue. I am very concerned. I think is seeing some of these mass shootings. I mean, it breaks my heart. It breaks your heart. I don't know how we fix it within our structure today, because I don't think science tells us that when this individual says they're going to do something, that they go out and do it. And I really struggle with this issue. I'm not going to support it. You do have a constitutional right. There's got to be due process. If we can find a way to increase the speed at which there's a resolution of the court, if somebody files a protective order, I think that's a better option. But to simply strip somebody's gun rights without a hearing, it's not appropriate.
I'm sure there's a lot of difficulty in balancing freedom, right, and right to bear arms with protection and wanting to protect those you love.
Right.
Okay, so I think one of our last things is the Utah flag change. What's your opinion on it?
Okay, so I'm going to be very, very clear. We've heard about the flag change. I've seen it all over the web. I have zero interest in changing the state flag. So I know there's a good representative from Orem. He's got a proposal. He's got a design. I know a businessman came to him in Utah County with a design. He brought his son. They argued for it. I think we have far too many important issues that we're dealing with on Capitol Hill than to worry about changing the state flag. So for me, I have zero interest in changing the flag. I know there's another bill that would spend the whole summer studying it, doing meetings up and down the state to consider a change. I'm going to vote no to both of those proposals. I like our flag. I like tradition. I'm here in Spanish Fork. I like going to the rodeo every year. Maybe I'm a little bit different, But to me, I like having consistency and tradition. I think there's a lot of tradition to our flag. Is it the prettiest flag in the country? No, but it's our flag.
What did they say was specifically that they wanted to change that was wrong with our flag?
I think they want a flag that's a little more flashy and a little more updated, something that's a little more modern. For me, I think there's a lot of history in our flag.
Yeah.
And is it the prettiest flag in the Union? I mean, probably not, but it's our flag. And for me, I have zero desire to see that change. To our viewers, if you want to weigh in, if you want to convince me that we should change our flag,
let them know.
I mean, let me know. mmckell@le.utah.gov. You can call, you can text, but I'm just not convinced that that's the best use of our time during this legislative session.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Any bills or anything?
I don't think there's anything else I want to add right now. I think one thing that's important to add, just as we wrap up, is I'm going to look at my schedule. We're going to see if people are listening to us today. Okay, this is our test. Okay. We are going to do another town hall meeting on March 2nd. People always ask me, how do I get involved? The real answer is just call. And I'll try to work with you on an issue if there's something that we need to work on. But on March 2nd at 7:30 at the Nebo boardroom in the Nebo School District, we had about 80 people last time. We're going to have free breakfast.
Bills and bagels.
Bills and bagels. So Scott Barlow at Revere Health will come in, and he's done this for years and years. We love Scott Barlow. We love Revere Health. They provide breakfast. Maggleby's comes in and caters it. We will be there. It'll be myself, Senator Henderson, Representative Gibson, Representative Roberts, Representative Thurston, and basically every elected representative in the legislature from Springville South. We will all be there, and we want the public to come. Free food. It's early. It's 7:30 in the morning, but that's the best time for breakfast anyways, right?
Yep. You know, I am a big advocate for sleeping in, but I made it to the last one, and it was really beneficial. I learned a lot that I wasn't even aware of happening. Right. So I think it's a great opportunity. And
it's fun. Come, bring your questions. We rank questions. You can see it. It's on the screen. We try to have a very transparent process. I mean, in the end, we make mistakes. We're elected officials, but I mean this. My job is to represent the good people in House District 66. Is to represent this community to the best of my ability. I am a better representative when I hear from my constituents. I'm going to make one last plug. Okay. I know I feel like a salesman right now. So.
But it's pretty good for the people.
Many people have received this in the mail, and we've got cameras all over in the room. I've got legislative surveys that I have mailed out. This is not junk mail. I actually review them. I read them. I've emailed out a survey as well. Typically, I like to read them. I'd like to know what people think. In the end, I need to make a decision. You know, for example, alcohol. In the end, that's pretty split, and in the end, I've got to make a decision that I think is appropriate. But I like to hear from folks down here and make sure that, you know, in the end, I don't want to screw things up either. So it's good to...
It's great to have such an involved representative. It, gives me some peace of mind. Definitely. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This has been a great conversation this morning. I want to thank our representative, Mike McKell, for being with us today. And thanks to you, our community members that took part in this conversation. We plan on doing this again next Saturday morning right here on Spanish Fork 17. Thanks for watching.